Hello, and welcome to Setting the Standard, the podcast about wireless radio standards creation from the Wireless Innovation Forum. Want to know the latest about the CBRS band, 6 GHz, the SCA, or any other advanced radio technology hot topics? You're in the right place. I'm your host and communications director of the forum, Stephanie Hamill. In this episode, I'm talking with John Glossner of Optimum Semiconductor Technologies and Louise Lamont of CRC Canada about the forum's Unmanned Autonomous Vehicle Wireless Networking, or DRONE for shorthand, Special Interest Group. The group is currently putting together a work report on the technological state of the industry on wireless drone networking. Okay, hi John, hi Louise, thanks for joining me today.
Hi.
Hey, Stephanie.
Okay, so today we're talking about the Unmanned Vehicle Wireless Network Special Interest Group. It's a mouthful. And about a year ago, the forum initiated the Special Interest Group, and we really focus on drones. So John, can you tell me why a special interest group and why it was formed?
Yeah, so if you think about the work in the forum, we're organized into committees, and those committees usually take on major topics like spectrum sharing or advanced technologies for R&D or 6 gigahertz or large portions of work. Then within those committees, they're typically organized into work groups on various topics, like testing within spectrum sharing or certification and security, things like this. And then even within that, they break down into smaller task groups, which focus on something that might be of interest to one of the working groups. And a good example, which I think you're going to cover in a future blog, is environmental sensing capability sensors, ESC sensors. That was a task group under work group 1 of the spectrum sharing committee. Every now and then, something comes along that might span committees or isn't really as focused in topic as maybe to be organized into a work group or task group. And so when we looked at unmanned aerial vehicles, otherwise commonly known as drones, we thought this would be a good candidate for a special interest group because it has interest across multiple committees, and there are people from all of the different committees who are participating in the drone special interest group. So we set it up that way so that first, its topics aren't really limited other than anything unmanned aerial vehicles. Any UAV topic is permissible, and it would also have broad appeal across multiple committees. So that's how we sort of ended up with the special interest group.
Okay. And so what topics then have you discussed since your formation?
So we've had actually a wide range of contributions over the last year. A number of them had to do with open source, but even beyond that, how to get licensed as pilots or at least recreational pilots. What are the Part 107 requirements? Unmanned traffic management and remote ID and some other very kind of sensitive topics like RID. We've had discussions on that, and they've ranged across a broad category of companies. If I pick out a couple that I think are interesting, so we spent quite a bit of time on open source projects within UAVs. And, we started looking at everything from the simulation of UAV systems with things like AirSim, which allows you to simulate the path of a drone and then renders it in Unreal Engine in pretty remarkable 3D quality. So that was one of the topics. And then we looked at a number of simulators as well, both for that can be used for drone swarms, as well as even the communication systems. So there's, like LTE and things like that. They can all run on the same event-based simulators, and there's multiple open source projects that do these exact same things. We spent a lot of time in that area looking at open APIs, autopilots. There's a couple open source autopilots, even open hardware to build your own drones. So those all were some interesting contributions. But more recently, we've had a pretty major effort going on in interference detection and localization. And so that was a contribution, pretty large one that was made just recently, and an interesting area for discussion.
Yeah, and we have Louise here from CRC who made that contribution. So Louise, can you talk about that a little bit for us?
Yeah, so currently the regulators are using ground sensors, whether they're fixed and mobile, to detect interference and to localize it. but it's got its limitations. So whenever you're in an area where there's a lot of multipath, or if you're in an area where there's mountains or blockage, then the ground sensors are not able to detect interference. In the same way, if the interference is elevated, the ground sensors can't pick it up. So we see drones as a complementary sensor to be able to overcome the limitations of the ground sensors. And as technology is evolving and safety also capabilities are progressing and evolving, we think that drones could be used possibly by the regulators in the future to be able to detect and localize interference.
That's great, Louise. Can you talk about some of the highlights from the report?
Yeah, so we did look at the rules and regulations for drones for flight operations in Canada, the US, the UK, and the European Union. And they're quite different, actually. And even in the States, they're different from, the rules can be different from one state to another. But they do have some commonalities. The drones need to be registered, pilots need to be certified. There's certain heights that you can, and weights that you can, there's restrictions on weights and heights. And also, you can't just use the drones can't fly over crowds or over close to airports, so there are some restrictions there. But the report focuses on 25 kilogram with payload drones because the restrictions are not as stringent. We also looked at activities that were being done in corporation and industry and academia. We did a literature survey, but we did also we interviewed a number of regulators, and we were wanting to know how they were using drones to do spectrum monitoring. And basically, it fell into two different categories. They use the drones for compliance purposes. So what they're doing is they're really looking at the radio towers or the cellular towers, and they're looking to see if the power levels are okay, if the antennas are the antenna pattern. So they're looking more at compliance and in urban areas. But there are some use cases for interference detection and localization, and those are a little bit more, I guess, futuristic. And it's all about being able to use drones in courtyards, on top of buildings, behind buildings where the ground sensors can't have access. So some of the regulators saw these as like potential really interesting use cases. But the problem with these is that you will need a special flight authorization, and these take a long time it takes a long time to get those. So the idea would be to be able to expedite these. So if you're doing interference detection and localization in an urban area, you can't wait a long time to get a certification, because then the interference it's just too lengthy. So the idea is to be able to expedite these certificates, and we see that with everything, like the rules keep changing all the time because we're making so much progress with the technology. So we see that happening. So so having authorization to be able to fly in certain areas, in urban areas. Yeah.
Okay, that sounds incredibly broad. So thank you for that contribution. And John, how will this be used as well as some of the other ones?
So what we're doing right now is we're taking the contributions that we have and putting them together into a technical report, which will be the first work product from the special interest group. And that's a TR on the technological state of the industry on wireless drone networking. So it will have all of the things that Louise just talked about, as well as, you know, unmanned traffic management and open source projects that can support that.
Fantastic. And who is the recipient or the beneficiary of this report?
So we expect actually a pretty broad swath of the industry to benefit from this. Everyone from wireless telecommunications regulators to autonomous vehicle manufacturers, including even airborne, ground, or even submersible, aviation electronics suppliers, automotive electronics suppliers, defense electronics manufacturers, and of course, wireless networking system integrators. And that'll be actually across a wide range of applications as well, both commercial and defense. Everything from ground transportation systems to, you know, drone taxis and things like this, to even one application out of defense that was just recently accomplished, which was aerial refueling from a drone.
That's exciting. That's a lot. What kind of timeline are we looking at?
So we've been taking these contributions, some of which are already in written form, others are in PowerPoint form, and we're integrating that. I think we'll probably be looking forward to having a first draft in a few weeks. Then it'll go through review within the drone special interest group, and eventually it'll go through review across, you know, the membership of the forum in general. So it'll probably be a couple of months before it's actually available to the public, and hoping to have the first draft within a few weeks.
That's great. And of course, we'll let everybody know when that happens, and it'll be on our Twitter and on our website. And what's next, John, after this report is done?
So certainly we've had many topics that we've already identified, of which we'll then continue to work on, some of which are in research and development, you know, for modeling and simulation, maybe even building experimental prototypes, things like that. Others are in defense and civil government, you know, things like even surveillance and other applications like that. But even it goes beyond that, even to include things like business models for drone companies, and maybe intellectual property. What are the, you know, IPR rights, and, you know, who has what, and, you know, the open source implications and patents on that. So we have a whole bunch of topics identified that after we get this TR out, we'll continue to look at and work on.
That's great. There'll be a busy SIG for the long-term future, it looks like. Got a lot to do. All right. Well, thank you so much, Louise. Thank you, John. I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me today.
All right. Thanks, Steph.
You.
All right, take care.